Hello everyone, today we are going to start IP services section of CCNA. In this one, we are going to start with SYSLOG, what kind of logging you can do in the system and how you can send it to SYSLOG servers or on the console, or if you are remotely accessing the device, how you can configure that system to send the logs there. And we will also look into what kind of severity levels are there and what is the meaning of their different severity levels. And finally, we will quickly do the labs. We will see how this works. Those who don't know me, my name is Vakas and I will be covering CCNA, NP and IE. Please hit like and subscribe and hit the bell icon so you can be notified for the upcoming videos. Let's get started. The first thing we are going to understand is why the logging is important and what are the different ways of it. The logging is important in the system. The reason is very simple. You want to know what happened with that system, who did it, what time it has been done. It could be system generated errors. It could be someone was logged into the system and he was configuring the system. There are multiple ways we can look into when it comes to compliance. You need to keep the logs, who accessed, what he did, what kind of configuration has been done. These are the reasons you need to have the logging. There is one important thing before you can configure the logging you need to do is your time should be synchronized with the NTP servers, which should be the centralized server for all the network devices, so that your logs are consistent across all the devices. We are going to configure the NTP section. Don't forget to subscribe the videos. And the next thing is how we can configure it. What are the different ways of it? One is logging buffer. What is logging buffer is it's gonna save all the logs, whatever on the console it's getting, into the memory. You can configure different levels for the console that, for example, starting from 0 to 7, you can mention what kind of logs you want. 7 is the highest. If you will mention 7, it will automatically cover all the logs which are, let's say, 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. It is going to cover all of that and it will be saving it into the memory. That is what happens in the logging buffer. The next one is if you are going to send this information to the remote device. That is what we call it, remote logging, or sending the logs to the SYSLOG servers. That is where we comes as remote logging. We will be configuring that one in the lab. That is simple. You need to have the SYSLOG server on the other end to receive all the logs, and it should be straightforward. The next thing is on the console. If you're connected on the console, this is the logging which is by default enabled, but you can disable it also if you want it and enable it as required. And you can change the level of the logging as well, which level of the logging you need. That is what we call it, logging console. And the last one is terminal monitor. That is basically, or it's also called as terminal logging. This terminal logging is if you are accessing the device over SSH telnet, how you can see the logs. All devices does not have this functionality, but you should be aware that this functionality is there. The next thing is what kind of levels are there. It starts from 0. 0 is the highest priority in terms of criticality and emergency. So this is for emergency of the system. Let's say there is a system is unusable or there is critical error on the system which is making the system unusable. This will be the last error logged before your system completely shut down itself, or maybe the hardware is crashed. So this will be the last log you will see it on the system. There are alerts where, let's say, if the status of the system change or it needs an immediate action from your side, let's say memory is corrupted or the RAM has bad sector, or many ways of getting these alerts. The next one you have is critical alerts, errors. If there is any error on the system, let's say CRC errors are there, if you have enabled the logging for those, you will see all the logging for that. There are multiple ways to configure this one, but these are the levels where you can easily tweak it and you can get the logs what you want. The highest one is debug mode. In this one, if there is any protocol running, for example, and you can do the debug IP net, for example, and you will see all the information for the debugging happening, and you should be able to get this one on the SYSLOG server. But this should not be run continuously because it puts a lot of load on the system, and it's good for if you're troubleshooting this any issue or any error, and you can enable it for a short time and disable it after that. How you can configure it? It's very simple. There are only 3-4 commands to tweak this whole functionality. For example, you will be mentioning logging console. You need to mention which level of logs you want, and that's it. You can mention the name or you can mention the number of that level, and you should be able to get all the logs there. It could be on the terminal, it can be on the buffer, it can be done on the remote syslog. The command is just you need to mention logging console, logging remote host, and it will start working. There is no issues. By default, only logging console is working, and you should be able to see all the logs on the console. Let's quickly analyze one of the log. Let's say we have received a log, what that log is showing. The first part is a timestamp. That's the reason I was mentioning you should be having the NTP synced across your devices. This is going to be your NTP log. This is going to be date timestamp on that one. The next one is the router and its event severity event level. You will see that. And the last part is the description part. In this one, it will be actually mentioning what is that error is all about. For example, in this error, it's showing that the line protocol has went up and down. So we are getting the information. This is how critical errors you will be getting, debug logs you will be getting. It's easier to read, it's self-explanatory. You can easily see into that and see what is the level of that log. For example, in this one, it's showing 5. So level 5 log has been received. This is the way, and you can tweak it if you need to get more information on that log. This is going to be our lab. In this one, I have one router which we will be configuring for different kind of logging. But all of that, you cannot do it on the packet tracer. I do suggest if you have any equipment, actual hardware, you can utilize terminal logging on that one, and you can also try logging buffer. I have the hardware, so I will show you on that one also how you can configure it. But I want to show you that on packet tracer, at least till what level you can do it. Let's quickly jump into that one. For example, we have on the right side, we have a syslog server. How you can configure syslog server on it? Just drop one server and go to its services. You should see syslog, and this is where you switch on or off. That's it. You have the syslog running. Let's go to the router and power it on. It is working fine. Everything seems running. Let's see if we have some IP addresses on it. Show IP interface brief. Show IP interface brief. Yes, the IP addresses are there. The syslog IP address is 192.168.1.100. Let's see if we can ping it. Yes. How we can configure this one? If you do show logging, you should be seeing all this information in this one. For example, on the console, the level of debugging is on. There are 2 messages logged, and by default it's working, but other levels are also getting logged except buffer logging. Let's quickly do one thing. Let's configure logging. This is one command. You will be playing with this one. You will configure everything through this. If you do question mark, you should see where you want to send the logs. You want to do the buffered, or you want to do the console based. Console is if you are connected with the console, which is by default on. And you can mention what will be the remote host where you will be sending this information. We want to send it to logging host 192.168.1.100. And if you do question mark, you have nothing. So the command is complete. And if you do logging host, this one, now let's try to see show logging. And if you notice on the screen, we already received a log that the logging has been started. And show logging, if you try to do it, now you can read it here that how many loggings has been sent. It's 4 line messages has been sent, 2 messages sent, all this information started receiving. If you go back to configure terminal interface VLAN 1, I just have one. So let's no shut it and let's try to shut it back. We should see these 2 logs on our syslog server. Let's go back to the syslog server. And if you just do here, we started seeing the logs on this one. That's how we get the remote logging. You can send it to your SIM solutions where you can do further analysis and take any actions on it or correlate the logs. That's easier to configure. Okay, and let's go to the console. On our laptop, I have the console on this one. Let's go to desktop and you should see terminal and you can click OK. All right, so we have our terminal running. In this one, if you notice, if you do this interface VLAN 1 and no shut, you should see a logging message came up, but you can also disable it, no logging console, and you should not see any further logs. Let's say interface VLAN 1, if you do shut, no log, no shut, no information. Okay, how you can enable it? Logging console. In real hardware, you will see level to be configured here, what level of logs you want it, but it's a virtualized, it does not have it. So you can do logging console 7, it does not accept it. So you just need to do logging console and you should start seeing the logs again. Interface VLAN 1, if I do shut and I have the logs, no shut, I have the logs. All right, this is how we configure for logging console. Logging terminal, it's not possible in the virtualized environment, and even the hardware which I have it, I couldn't find the option to do that. Okay, going back to the real actual hardware, this is one of the hardware it's running in my lab. If I go to configure terminal, if you do the logging, you see a lot more commands to configure. You can have buffered, you can configure the levels and everything. For example, if you do logging buffered and do the question mark, you should see the level here. What level of logging you want? If I want to change it, I just have to mention I want the logging 5, for example. And if you do show logging, you should see that I have logging enabled, and all of this information is getting logged in the system itself. By default, the buffer size is 4096. It's working fine. So that's how you enable logging buffered. And if you notice here, the level of this one is notification, and you have this many logged messages in the system. All right, and if you do show logging, you should start seeing all the messages which are getting logged. This is how we configure different kind of logging. In CCNP and CCIE, you will learn a lot more in terms of logging, but for CCNA level, it's more than enough to understand there is an option, there is a possibility to log in, and these are the different ways to log that information. If I have increased your knowledge in any ways, please hit like and subscribe and hit the bell icon so you can be notified for the upcoming videos. I will see you in the next lecture. Take care.